Yes, fuck China's government, media, and officials, but hating Chinese people is racist. Due to the outbreak of COVID-19, I'm seeing a lot of hate against the Chinese government and media. I 100% agree with this, as with many other Asian Americans. What I don't agree with is the blatant racism against Chinese people, me included. I'm talking actual racism, not funny Asian jokes. I've seen news articles about Chinese kids being savagely beaten by bullies. People on Reddit are calling Chinese people as a whole savage animals and degenerates, and they're getting praised for it. People need to realize that Chinese people are people, and they're just as fucking scared about this whole thing as you are. Small Asian businesses in the U.S. have taken a huge hit from this virus, before it spread to a point where it became vital to stay inside in general, both due to plain stupidity and racism. I remember seeing a post on this sub saying that the Chinese are degenerates and shouldn't even be called Asians. Like I said, blame China's terrible government and media, not the Chinese ethnicity as a whole. Yes. There's a big difference between hating China and hating the citizens. I'm said that I have to agree with you that this is an unpopular opinion where I live. Hating Chinese government or their mentality isn't racism. Hating Chinese people and wanting them to be fucked up is racism. I got attacked yesterday by some random weirdo. I'm Chinese American, born in Manassas, VA. Never faced racism in my adult life. I already responded to someone who didn't believe it, but I will share again. I was attacked yesterday getting some takeout. Some guy was yelling at me and came over to me as I was going to my car trying to confront me. I rushed to my car and GTFO. So yes, it is happening. Plus the Chinese restaurant where I'm getting food at is getting prank calls with fake orders, so they weren't picking up the phone but instead calling numbers back to get orders. So this is very real. If you don't believe it is a problem, you are part of the problem. I called 911 and the dispatcher sounded very sympathetic. This is DC metropolitan area where it is very diverse with a big Asian community. I am with you on this one. My sister works in a dental office and they saw a Chinese American patient who had teeth knocked out because a group of angry people physically attack her because her people caused COVID-19. It is terrible that some jags want to use COVID-19 as an excuse to be racist bullies. I'm not Chinese but I am American and I'm disgusted at some of the hateful comments I've seen directed at Chinese people. This may not provide any consolation, but much of this content seems to be created by accounts less than a year old, so I'd take whatever they say with a grain of salt. This may simply be part of a wider inauthentic campaign meant to sow division. Reddit in general has not done a good job at policing brigading and the authenticity of users. I'm a Chinese medical student and when I take off my white coat, I'm suddenly a dirty Asian. The other day, a patient I was seeing asked if I had been to Wuhan recently. It's so discouraging. People not only thinking doctors are invincible and are obligated to take care of people at any cost, but the racism that's been directed toward me. It's making me very angry. It's the people that participate in wet markets or eat wild animals that I hate. I love how this sub has become competitive soapboxing. Bruh, since when is racism is bad? An unpopular opinion. TLDR, funny Chinese joke while a little racist is funny. Blatant racism is not funny. I understand emotionally, it may be easy to blame Chinese people as a whole when you're losing your job due to a virus that broke out in China, but Chinese people by and large are actually being the most devastated by this. The people who consume at wet markets are predominantly wealthy individuals, and these markets only exist in reaction to Communist China's absolute failure of governance, and the subsequent greed of state capitalist-era China thereafter. Their government is filled with slimy pieces of shit who should be in jail for crimes against humanity at this point, if such a thing is possible, but most Chinese people genuinely don't even want those markets open. They're not very common, and they're a stain on Chinese culture. Agree, people think now they just have a free pass to be racist. I would really like to hope that this isn't an unpopular opinion, but I would be naive to think that. My sister's friend, we'll call her V, and her family have owned a Chinese restaurant for a decade, and even before the coronavirus got to the US, such as in January and February, their business started tanking. It's gotten so bad that V says people will literally just come in to harass them and verbally berate them. It's fucking disgusting. Like, how can you blame an entire race for something that isn't their fault at all? To top it off, V and her family aren't even Chinese, they're Vietnamese, and Asians as a whole are being targeted. I haven't seen anything firsthand, but the best every else can do is to step in when we see this type of bullshit harassment ourselves. I really don't see this opinion expressed very often. Everyone I know is able to distinguish between the Chinese people and their government, which is oppressive, hostile, dishonest. This isn't an unpopular opinion op. I think the majority of normal Americans feel this way. Hate to hear about your experiences. That's not what America was built on, or why it was founded. The Chinese government are a bunch of lying bastards. The Chinese people are just caught up in the mess. A global pandemic should be a time of unity. Fuck Trump for continuing to call it the Chinese virus. He's just trying to push more blame on China because he knows the U.S. government, under his power, is completely responsible for why so many are sick and dying. He is just as culpable as China. There might be a cultural problem with wet markets and eating infected meats of animals. The SARS epidemic was rooted in the exact same source as COVID-19. Well put up. Racism against Chinese people is not okay. But speaking up against Chinese government is not only okay, but is our duty to ensure we continue to live in a free world. I went to China on a tour once, and the people I met there were the same as any of us, and they were very kind and welcoming at everywhere I went, so yeah, I completely agree. I used to think Chinese immigrants to North America were so fucking rude, always pushing their way in front and generally inconsiderate. Until I went to China, and holy fuck, the amount of people there is unreal. If you don't push your way to the front and look out for yourself, you'll get nowhere. It made me realize that these people weren't rude, they had just grown up in such a different environment that that's just what they knew. I find the same thing with American tourists. They can be the most self-entitled, obnoxious group that you run into. Not making excuses for their behavior, it just makes more sense why it happens when you know where they are coming from.